You're 5 years old again. Small hands, wide eyes, a heart so open it doesn't yet know how to armor itself. And then, one day, something happens. A slap, a silence, a betrayal too big for your tiny mind to make sense of. You don't have the words, so you bury it. Deeper than bone, deeper than memory. You forget it, but it remembers you. Now, fast forward. You're sitting at a table, coffee half cold, phone lighting up with names that don't make your chest feel safe. You laugh too loud at things you don't find funny. You say you're fine even when something inside you is screaming through the silence. You call it adulthood. Society calls it functioning. But deep down, something in you still aches and you don't know why. Why do we repeat the pain we never wanted? Why do our deepest wounds become our most familiar companions? Why is it that the things that hurt us the most often define us the most? Here lies the paradox that most never dare to examine. The wound becomes the teacher, not the healer, not the comfort of the teacher, and it does not teach gently. You may think you've outrun it. Years pass, degrees earned, relationships made and broken, but something invisible keeps pulling the strings behind the curtain of your life. An echo of that first cut, a memory without a timestamp. It's the reason you sabotage love. It's the reason you fear success. It's the voice that says you're not enough, even as you chase perfection. We call it trauma. Jung called it the shadow. Nietzsche saw it as necessary suffering. But no matter what name you give it, the truth is this: there is a wound at the center of your identity, and it's not going anywhere until you listen. So, here's the real question. What if the very pain you've spent your whole life avoiding is the only thing that truly knows who you are? What if the wound doesn't just hurt but points? What if its ache is not a curse, but a compass? What if everything you fear, everything you suppress, and everything you reject about yourself is secretly trying to liberate you? Would you have the courage to look it in the eye? Because here's the catch: until you confront the wound, it owns you. And what owns you defines you. That's the quiet tyranny of the unhealed. It doesn't scream. It shapes. It writes your story in your voice, but not in your truth. So, we must ask, what happens when you stop numbing and start listening? What happens when you finally stop running and face the ghost that lives inside your chest? This isn't about healing in the way the world sells it: bubble baths and surface positivity. This is about truth, the kind that ruins you before it rebuilds you, the kind that strips you naked of illusions and then hands you back your name. There is a wound in you, not a flaw, not a weakness, a wound, and it is waiting to teach you, but only if you're willing to feel it. Now, let's uncover why this wound exists in the first place, and why no one ever taught you to honor it. The world is full of people who appear to be functioning, getting up, going to work, maintaining relationships, but beneath the surface lies a quiet epidemic, a disconnection from the self, born out of pain never confronted. We live in a society that teaches avoidance as virtue. Suffering is pathologized, pain is shameful, and wounds are hidden like sins. But the wound doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It evolves. It camouflages. It becomes identity. Think of a child who's humiliated in front of others, rejected not just by circumstance, but by presence itself. If that pain isn't processed, it calcifies. The child becomes the quiet one, the achiever, the caretaker, or worse, the failure. Personality forms not out of freedom but protection. The ego builds walls where it once held open doors. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile because they don't fit the image we've constructed to survive. The wound is the birthplace of this shadow. Every unexpressed rage, every swallowed cry, every moment of powerlessness, these fragments don't vanish. They go underground, and from there, they begin to shape our lives in invisible, insidious ways. We fall in love with people who reflect our original wounds. We seek approval from people who mimic those who first denied us. We choose careers not based on desire, but on deep-seated compensation. And still, we wonder why we feel hollow after success. The psychologist Gabor points out that most forms of addiction are not about substances. They're about pain, about disconnection. Not why the addiction, he says, but why the pain. And this doesn't just apply to drugs or alcohol. We become addicted to performance, to praise, to control, to numbing through scrolling or achievement, because anything is better than feeling. Nietzsche didn't view suffering as an accident. He saw it as essential. To live is to suffer, he wrote. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. But our culture has inverted this. We are conditioned to seek comfort above meaning, and in doing so, we sever ourselves from the very thing that could set us free, truthful suffering. But what is truthful suffering? It is not wallowing. It is not trauma tourism. It is the radical act of facing what hurts without flinching, and allowing it to teach you what safety never could. It is the moment you stop asking, "How can I fix this?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me about myself?" Philosophers like Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, understood this firsthand. In the face of unbearable pain, he developed logotherapy, a school of thought based on the idea that human beings are not driven by pleasure or power, but by meaning. When everything else is stripped away, only meaning can keep you alive. And often, it is the wound that opens the door to that meaning. But there's a darker truth still. We are taught to abandon the wound, not just ignore it, but actively reject the parts of us it created. This is where the deepest fracture happens. We begin to disown ourselves. The loud child becomes ashamed of their voice. The sensitive one becomes the cynic. The curious one becomes the overthinker. And the wound unnoticed becomes identity dressed in defense mechanisms. The world doesn't teach us to listen to our wounds. It teaches us to monetize them, to hide them, to wrap them in self-help language, and pretend they're no longer bleeding. But you can only lie to yourself for so long. Eventually, the cost of suppression outweighs the safety it once provided. You begin to feel it in your relationships, repeating patterns, unexplained anger, intimacy that terrifies more than fulfills. You feel it in your work, burnout masked as ambition, emptiness hidden beneath success. You feel it in your quietest moments when there's no noise left to distract you from yourself. That's the hidden problem. We've mistaken survival strategies for personality traits, and it all goes back to the wound, the pain you avoided, the truth you silenced, the moment you fragmented. You are not broken, but you are divided, and every division creates distortion. How you see yourself, how you see others, how you define love, safety, purpose. So the question becomes, what happens when you stop running from the pain and instead sit with it, listen to it, let it speak? Because perhaps it's not there to destroy you. Perhaps it's there to reveal you. In the next section, we'll uncover how this hidden wound doesn't just affect your inner world. It reshapes your reality in ways most never see coming. You think you're making your own choices. You think you're in control, charting a course, building a life, making decisions based on what you want. But what if you're not? What if it's not you choosing at all? What if it's the wound? Imagine for a moment that the wound is a silent architect designing your reactions, your attractions, your ambitions, every relationship you enter, every opportunity you pass up, every person you trust or push away, all filtered through an old, unhealed pain, not consciously, but reflexively, like muscle memory forged in trauma. This is not your imagination. This is how the brain works. When we experience pain, especially emotional pain, the brain encodes it in the limbic system, the emotional center that bypasses logic. The result? You begin to see the world through the lens of your injury, like a soldier flinching at the sound of fireworks. Your nervous system becomes wired for protection, not truth. So what does this mean? It means your fear of abandonment isn't really about your current partner. It means your obsession with achievement isn't really about ambition. It means your avoidance of vulnerability isn't about being independent. These are echoes of the original wound. And the most disturbing part, you don't even know it's happening. Because when pain is suppressed long enough, it becomes invisible. You think, this is just who I am, but it's not. It's who you became to survive. Psychologically, this process is called schema, formation cognitive frameworks, shaped by early experiences. If your wound was betrayal, you may grow to expect it everywhere. If it was neglect, you may believe you're unworthy of attention. These mental filters become self-fulfilling prophecies. You don't just carry the wound, you recreate it again and again, often in subtle, tragic ways. Let's go deeper. Why do so many people fear love? Not because love itself is dangerous, but because love requires exposure. Love invites the very vulnerability that the wound taught you to avoid. And so you find yourself drawn to emotionally unavailable partners, to chaotic dynamics, to people who can't or won't see you. It's not random. It's the wound speaking in code. This same mechanism plays out in every area of life. You avoid risks because you fear failure, but that fear is rooted in a wound that told you failure equals rejection. You become hyperproductive because stillness feels like uselessness, because a wound once equated worth with output. You play small, even though your soul wants expansion, because somewhere along the line, the wound convinced you that visibility equals danger. And society rewards this dysfunction. It celebrates resilience without asking what we had to survive. It praises independence without questioning if it's just emotional exile. It markets confidence built on ego, not authenticity. Modern culture is a playground of performance, and many of us are just acting, playing roles scripted by our unhealed pasts. But here's the twist. The more you deny the wound, the more it drives your life. Carl Jung famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is the heart of it. The real danger of the wound isn't just pain, it's misdirection. And it doesn't stop with the individual. Unhealed wounds shape entire communities, nations, civilizations. A culture raised on emotional repression breeds leaders who weaponize fear. A generation told to toughen up grows numb to empathy. An economy built on insecurity will keep people addicted to consuming, hustling, proving. In this way, the personal wound becomes collective pathology. Think of the child who learned that expressing need leads to punishment. That child grows into an adult who refuses to ask for help, perhaps becoming a boss who demands perfection, or a parent who unconsciously withholds comfort. The wound doesn't disappear. It evolves. It mutates into systems, policies, ideologies. And all of it begins with one simple, devastating lie. This doesn't matter. But it does. Because what we don't heal, we repeat. What we don't examine, we project. What we don't feel, we force others to carry for us. This is the unseen consequence of the wound. It robs you of authenticity, not in the superficial sense of being real, but in the existential sense of being whole. Without wholeness, there is only survival. And survival is not life, it's endurance. So the question now becomes, can you live without the wound defining you? Can you break the cycle not by fixing yourself, but by facing yourself? In the next section, we'll explore what it actually means to rebel against the wound, not by destroying it, but by transforming through it. You'll learn what true liberation looks like, and why the path to freedom always begins in the place you've been most afraid to return. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest, where the trees are thick with shadows familiar, haunting, and oddly comforting. You've walked this path for so long that even the pain feels like home. But now something inside you whispers that there must be more. And there is. But the way out isn't what you've been told. It's not a 10-step plan, not a positive affirmation, not a quick fix. It's something far more radical. The rebellion begins not by rejecting the wound, but by turning toward it. This is the first paradox you must confront. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. The world has trained you to look away from your suffering, to distract, to numb, to escape. But pain doesn't disappear when ignored. It festers, it waits, and it speaks in the language of fear, rage, addiction, withdrawal, or perfectionism until you finally listen. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, a path toward becoming whole by integrating what was once repressed. To walk this path, you must go inward and downward, into the underworld of your psyche, into your shadow. And here's the truth no one tells you: the wound isn't your enemy, it's your compass. It points to the exact place where your soul was split, where your self was buried, where your truth was silenced. Your wound holds your story, and inside that story is the key to your liberation. But this takes courage, not the kind celebrated in movies, the silent, brutal kind. The courage to face your own reflection without flinching. The courage to say, "This happened. It hurt, and it shaped me, but it will not define me anymore." Now the rebellion begins. First, you stop pretending, you stop performing wellness, and start pursuing wholeness. Wholeness is messy. It's grief and laughter in the same breath. It's holding space for rage without becoming cruel. It's knowing you are both the wounded and the healer, the storm and the shelter. Then you break the silence. You speak the wound, to yourself, to someone you trust, to a journal, to the mirror. It doesn't matter how only that it's honest. Words are spells, and naming your pain disarms its grip. What was once unspeakable becomes understandable. What was once chaos becomes narrative. And with narrative comes power. Third, you find the pattern. Healing is not just emotional, it's analytical. You start to ask, when did this begin? What does this remind me of? Who was I trying to protect when I built this armor? These questions peel back the layers. You begin to see not just what hurts, but why. And when the why becomes clear, the wound loses its mystery and its control. But here's where the rebellion becomes truly revolutionary. You reclaim the gift hidden in the wound. Nietzsche once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." What if your pain wasn't the end, but the beginning? What if your deepest wound became your greatest wisdom, your greatest art, your greatest act of empathy? This is not romanticizing trauma, it's transcending it. Consider Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of Auschwitz and emerged with a philosophy that has changed lives. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. He turned suffering into meaning, not by denying the wound, but by finding purpose within it. Or look to people like Gabor Mate, who reveals that addiction is not a moral failure, but a coping mechanism for pain. In doing so, he flips the script from shame to compassion. That's rebellion. And what about you? What if your anxiety is the price you pay for sensitivity in a world that rewards numbness? What if your people-pleasing was a brilliant survival strategy for a child trying to stay safe? What if your self-doubt was once a shield from punishment, now outdated but still active? What if your wound is evidence not of weakness but of wisdom? Rebellion, then, is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget, before the betrayal, the abandonment, the silence, before you learned that your truth was too much, or your needs too inconvenient. The most radical act is to become whole in a world that profits from your fragmentation. You do this by creating new rituals, not performative habits but sacred ones. Time spent in silence, walks without distraction, journaling not just the good, but the ugly, speaking to yourself with the tenderness you were once denied, seeking therapy, mentors, or community not to fix you, but to witness you. And above all, you begin to choose differently. You choose relationships that honor your growth, not your performance. You choose rest without guilt. You choose to say no when your body says no. You choose to speak truth even when your voice trembles. You choose the unfamiliar path not because it's easy but because it's yours. This is what it means to rebel against the wound, not to erase it, but to stop obeying it, to stop organizing your entire life around not getting hurt again. Because safety, when pursued through avoidance, becomes a prison. But freedom, true freedom, begins when you stop running. In the next and final section, we go deeper. You stop seeing your past as a chain and start seeing it as a map. You stop fearing your sensitivity and start using it as your compass. You stop chasing healing and start embodying wholeness, because the wound no longer defines you, it refines you. And so, you become something the world rarely expects, dangerously free, not because life stops hurting, but because you stop collapsing in the face of it. You've grieved, you've raged, you've lost, and still, here you are, more real, more rooted, more awake than ever before. You speak with the voice of someone who has met themselves in the dark. You love with the kind of openness that terrifies those still armoring their hearts. You stand with a stillness that makes people wonder, how are you not afraid? But the truth is, you are afraid. You just kept going anyway. And now you see others still caught in the same cycles, performing strength, avoiding silence, building empires of distraction. And you know they don't need saving, just witnessing, just someone to say, I've been there too. And you're not crazy, you're becoming. You carry your scar like a lantern now, not as proof of your suffering, but as light for those still in the dark. That's what the wound gave you, a torch forged in fire. And this is where the story ends, or rather begins anew. Not with triumph, but with truth. Not with perfection, but presence. You don't need to erase your past to have a future. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to be here fully, brutally, beautifully here. Because the final truth is simple, and it changes everything. You are not here to be untouched by life. You are here to be transformed by it. And the wound that taught you was the first honest thing that ever did. Fade to black, a quiet heartbeat, then silence. The viewer is left not with answers but with a mirror. What is your wound, and what is it trying to teach you?